boys and girls, dogs and cats, children, as well as babies, scientists, engineers, auto mechanics, thieves, politicians, doctors, artists. All of you are welcome to join the Driveline Academy podcast, the world's most dangerous youth baseball podcast. I'm your host, Deven Morgan, Director of Youth Baseball at Driveline, founder of said Driveline Academy. And I am not joined, as per usual, by my brother, my partner, my co-host, Driveline Academy Assistant Director Jeremy Chekteal, International Man of Mystery Jeremy Chekteal, because he is internationally mysterying his way through Europe. We're back, in the words of the great AZ that you may be familiar with from Nas's Illmatic album, the Life's a B-Word track. He has the phenomenal guest appearance there. We're back, or I'm back. Jeremy isn't back because I, for the first time in 34 years of my working life, since the age 14, you can do the math to figure out how old I am, took 2 weeks off continuously of vacation. And once I got back, Jeremy actually left for his vacation. So we missed probably almost a month of doing the pod for you guys. Our apologies. Things are pretty crazy around here. What with the conclusion of our season, a lot of restructuring stuff we did within the academy that required a ton of work, a ton of effort, a ton of consternation. It was a lot. And with that, we kind of just hunkered down and concentrated on our stuff. So again, I apologize. We didn't make time to kind of run through the stuff that we typically do on the pod and leave you guys hanging, but we're back. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a Q&A episode with myself today. Really going to kind of keep it focused tightly on the Q&A because once my brother Jeremy is back in here with me, we are going to go through and talk about all the stuff that you guys want to hear about how the season ended, what were the developmental results, how did the game results go, and what did we learn from all of this stuff? What does season 4 of the Driveline Academy portend for season 5? And there's a lot of good stuff there. Yeah, like I kind of want to talk about it, but again, I will hold back. I will repress because the other thing that I'm going to get a chance to talk about once Jeremy is back is my first experience with international baseball. My son got a chance to go play on an 18U team in a tournament in Parma, Italy. International baseball is a doozy. Shout out to my guy Kuba from the Czech Republic, a kid that I met out there. Again, man, I want to tell these stories, but I'm going to hold them back for when Jeremy's back. So loyal listeners will know that at this point, before we get into the Q&A, we are going to talk about housekeeping. And the first item in housekeeping is, as per usual, axebat.com. You should go to axebat.com. You should buy a bat or some other like bat hitting device or other things that Axe sells, and you should use code DL20 to get yourself 20% off of that purchase. DL as in famous comedian DL Hughley. Maybe that's a reference that lands for you, maybe not. So D as in dinosaur, L as in loop. Dinosaur Loop 20. Get yourself 20% off at axebat.com. Other items of housekeeping. Skills to Scale, the Complete Youth Baseball Training Manual is up there. You might be able to see it in the shot. Maybe you're not. But anyways, it's a book. It's everything that I've got to give you for a training manual for how to develop your youth athlete and keep the entire experience positive and engaging, because if we're not doing that, then like, what's the point? So that's the Skills to Scale Complete Youth Baseball Training Manual. Yes, it is a book, but yes, it also comes with a bunch of online resources as well, including our yearly training plan, our micro and macro training plans. So we're talking about the big phase stuff, right? How to think about a 12-month calendar and break it down by training phase relative to when you want to play games, and what do you do with the other time developmentally to build skill. Bat speed training plans, bat to ball training plans, velocity development plans, in-season arm care programs, all that stuff. And at a certain point, when we get into the Q&A section of today's pod, I am going to say you should probably just buy the book, because a lot of these answers are best laid out, not only in terms of conceptually what we want to do and why, but also structurally, how do you actually implement them with the book. So Skills to Scale Complete Youth Baseball Training Manual. Other than that, the typical stuff I have for you, other tools you can utilize in the way that you help your player develop in this game. Power Bat. Power Bat is good for developing bat speed. Bat speed is the most critical ingredient in hitting success at basically every level, so you should probably spend some amount of time to address it. That's the Power Bat. It's $99. You can find it at drivelinebaseball.com. The other thing you might want to consider is a Youth Underload Smash Bat. Youth Underload Smash Bat. What does that mean? It is a bat for youth that is Underload, meaning it's light, it's really, really light. And it is a smash bat, meaning it has a very small circumference barrel. What is that? How does that help you? Well, the smaller the barrel diameter is, the more important it is that you swing the bat fast and accurately in order to make flush contact. So you can train that thing discreetly, both barrel accuracy and bat speed at the exact same time. You can use that with the mini hitting pliers. You can use it with smash factor balls. You can use it with regular baseballs. Just don't do it off a machine. So power bat, $99. Youth Underload Smash bat, $79. Very good training tools. Of course, I would sound like an idiot if I designed them and got them patented, but then I didn't say you should go buy them. I think they're pretty good tools. We're just trying to build tools that are the stuff that we want to use for our kids, and then we make it available to you guys. Side note, once again, I'll put out the call. If you're interested in a 28-inch version of our youth power bat, drop me a line at Deven at drivelinebaseball.com. I think we are pretty close to like the critical mass that we need to get the minimum order quantity to go to get those things made. So if you've been on the fence, you've been waffling, maybe I don't want to bother Deven, maybe I don't want to send him an email, Deven at drivelinebaseball.com, 2 E's. Let me know if you're interested in a 28 version of the power bat, and we will make it so. Other housekeeping stuff. Hey, you want to take advantage of Driveline type of training, but you don't want to move to Kent, Washington or Scottsdale, Arizona? I have a thing for you. Driveline Academy Flex, Driveline Academy Snapshots. Driveline Academy Snapshot is a 90-minute assessment that we might just soon call a Driveline Youth Assessment. I don't know. We might rebrand the thing. But anyways, it's 90 minutes. You're going to capture biomechanics on your hitting, on your throwing, and on the force plates in order to develop kind of a strength profile for you, but then also understand the skill stuff as well. You have a meeting with one of our trainers. It's real good. It's the best 90 minutes that you can spend to kind of understand where your player is right now and where they want to get to relative to their goals. The recurring version of that is Driveline Academy Flex. Flex is an in-gym retest every 4 weeks. It's a weekly training session in one of our locations, if that's available to you. And it's the monthly meetings with our trainers. It's the customized support. It's leveraging technologies like Pocket Radar and Blast and Driveline Pulse in order to basically give you an experience training remotely that is as close as we can get it to be if you were in the gym. So if you want to do the Driveline, you want to take advantage of all this technology, you want to work with one of our trainers, but you don't want to move, or you don't want to leave the current select club baseball team that you're on, Driveline Academy Flex, Driveline Academy Snapshots, go check them out. Housekeeping complete. Right, Jeremy? Right. Okay, good. So let's get into the Q&A thing. I'll try to not hit my face into the microphone, and let's see what we got from you guys. Okay, question numero uno was about side work. And this is a good question. The question was basically, how do I structure my players' training if I'm trying to give them stuff on their off days that doesn't, it's not too much. It doesn't kind of impact the other stuff that were going on. So let's talk about it. In this specific phase of things, today is Thursday, August 8th at 3:02 p.m., the year of our Lord, 2024. I would hope that unless you've got a pretty good reason, your player is no longer playing games. Let's, first of all, check that box. Why is this important? Well, it's important because we want to do everything we can to mitigate injury risk. Trying to think of how to make this digestible and get this out of my crazy brain and into your thought process. So I think to understand youth throwing, there's a couple things you want to grapple with. One, kids when they're young, and let's just say that I am globally meaning when they are young as preteens. Let's just keep it exclusive to preteens. 13s and 14s introduces a ton of other physiological variants that is always a delight to deal with. So let's just keep this aimed discreetly at the preteen crowd. Pre-teenagers, so 12 and under, as observed in our motion capture laboratory, generally don't produce a ton of force when they throw. What does that mean? It means that when compared against older athletes, young preteen kids do not produce a bunch of stress on the joints of their arm and their shoulder when they are throwing, no matter the velocity and no matter the mechanical perfection or lack thereof. I've got some data. Maybe I can throw that over at the side of the screen where Jeremy would normally be. I might just actually take a picture of him and put him in the chair like we do for A-Rod. Um, anyways, we've got a ton of data in our lab about kids, the force that they produce on the joints when they throw. Um, all of them at the preteen level are really, really, really low when compared to teenagers, high school, collegiate, professional player populations. So hold that idea in your head. The other idea that I want you to hold in your head is that the most common throwing injuries that we seem to encounter in baseball, and the ones that typically lead to other types of injuries if they are not addressed, are repetitive stress injuries. What does that mean? What I'm talking about is Little League elbow and Little League shoulder. Both of these injuries, as far as I understand them, and I am just a dumb guy who has spent a lot of time reading research papers, and I am not a doctor. However, I can read. Um, what I understand about these injuries, and what I think everybody should understand about these injuries, is they're typically, the best way to understand them is like repetitive stress injuries. From the repetitive stress of movements on these joints and the tissue tendon systems involved in the throw. So, if you think about both of these items at the same time, we have two things we need to grapple with. One, kids don't produce a ton of force on a per throw basis. Two, the most common injuries that they have are repetitive stress injuries. So, what does that mean? It means that even though on the acute basis, meaning a single throw, kids don't produce a ton of force, the gradual accumulation of said throws can still lead to injury. I think that makes sense, right? Um, it's not typically that you would see a 12-year-old who's going to go out and make one throw and everything mechanically went wrong on that throw, and that throw compelled them, because of its mechanical inaccuracy, to produce way more stress on the joint than normal. That just doesn't seem to be the case. Again, I can show you an XY plot of basically like mechanical efficiency in the gym and total force produced, and for this type of player population. And I will grant that maybe what we have is a little bit of a small sample. However, the trend would still suggest that it isn't the acute throw that is the injury risk. It's the accumulation of throws, kind of regardless of mechanical grading. To get into the weeds, I suppose it could be true that if your player has really, really bad mechanics and they have an accumulation of throws leveraging those bad mechanics, that player might run into a repetitive stress injury earlier than a player who has really good mechanics. And because those really good mechanics and really efficiently sequenced mechanics produces less stress on a per throw basis on their arm. I suppose that would be true, but the actual truth that we want to come to here is understanding that both of those players, the one that is like the mechanical panacea and the kid that looks like 50 Cent when he threw out the first pitch, both of those kids, if given an opportunity to not take time away from the repetitive stress of throwing, are likely to become injured. That is a thing that can happen. Okay. If we understand that, then it makes sense to say at the conclusion of our gameplay phase, we should take some amount of time to step back from throwing, to give the body an opportunity to recover from this repetitive stress of throwing, from this accumulation of throwing workload. I feel like this is like a 10-minute warm up to answer this question, but I promise it's worth it. So if that's true, then in August and September, at least for the kids in our program, that is a no throw period. Now, just because we're not doing throwing stuff in August and September, or even just the month of August, if we wanted to take both September and October to onboard back into throwing and slowly accumulating more workload, we want to take time off. And during that time off period, The question is, my kid wants to do extra work. Well, how do I maintain their ability to recover from the stress of this competitive season, whatever development practice they had prior to or during? How do I keep that whole in this phase but allow them to do extra stuff? So, here's what I would suggest. Great time to focus on the defensive stuff, great time to focus on strength, great time to focus on hitting. But if you're going to do the defensive stuff, do it in a way that keeps that no throw period intact for whatever duration is appropriate. I would suggest at least 4 weeks is probably a good idea. And if you're going to give just a 4 week time off from throwing, you want to slowly and progressively over the course of probably 6 to 8 weeks reacclimate them to throwing anything close to intent. It should be a deliberate and periodized process. Periodization meaning we're going to slowly kind of increase the amount of stress and stimulus that they get. Simple way to think about that on the throwing side is slowly increasing both volume of throws and intensity of throws and playing with those sliders over the course of this onboard. So you want to do extra work. That looks like things like EDDs, right? EDDs are something we can do. Most kids need them. It's good for them to kind of impact and burn in some of those good posture, position, habits, the way that they receive the ball. So EDD is a great thing to do. You could even do full-blown fielding. However, if you're going to do full-blown fielding, here's what I would do. You want to have your player get in a position to receive the ball. You want to have that player get in a position to field the ball. You want to have that player get into a position where they're ready to throw to whatever the target is going to be. You do not want them to make that throw. But Deven, what if I just have them hold on to the ball? Well, the thing that you need to be aware of is the towel drill study. If I remember correctly, and if somebody can heat check me on this, we've referenced it a couple times. There was a study that came out earlier in the year this year, or perhaps last year in the off season, that suggested that when players were doing the towel drill, and it didn't suggest, it showed that when kids are doing towel drills, they were still putting somewhere north of 80% of the valgus stress on the elbow joint as they were when they were actually throwing a regular baseball. So if that's true, then holding a 5-ounce baseball and going through the throwing motion but not releasing said ball is still going to put some amount of stress on that arm, and it's the same type of stress that we are trying to have kids deload for during this no throw period to step back and give them a chance to recover from the repetitive stress of throwing. I feel like that was a 15-minute answer to what could have been probably a very short question, but hey, welcome to the Driveline Academy podcast where Deven talks too much. Short story. EDDs, fielding, let them get into a throwing position. Do not go through the throwing motion while they hold on to a 5-ounce baseball. Question answered. Another question. 12U kids, and I'll just go ahead. This was from Twitter, so I'll just get to the actual quote itself. My guy, Michael Smith, shout out to Michael. Question is, let's use a 12U team for an example. How many innings do you believe a player needs to pitch in a summer season to develop as a pitcher? I'm going to come back to that to develop question because that's the most critical part here. He says, we typically play about 40 6-inning games, about 240 innings total. What's the best way to allocate these things to develop the most pitchers? So 40 games in the summer, that feels typical nowadays. I don't think that feels particularly egregious. If you're playing 40 in the summer, let's say you're playing some type of like rec ball before that, that's going to be about 20 games. You're talking about a kid playing a 60-game season. Shoot, man, in today's world of youth baseball, I think 60 games is actually conservative almost, it feels like. But I digress. So you've got a 12U team. You got to get through 240 innings. And the question is, how do you kind of slice that up to have kids with an optimal opportunity to develop? Now, to me, I'm going to hone in on what does it mean for these kids to develop in this specific endeavor. At the 12U level, let me think if I could put this in a meaningful fashion. I probably want them to throw somewhere between 50 and 55% strikes. And I want them to do that in a way that they learn how to get comfortable at an output level that is, depending on the player and depending on the situation, somewhere between 75 and 95% of their total potential output. Um, that to me is a good developmental goal for these kids. Um, I want them to leverage the opportunity that the gameplay affords to get better at moving fast and challenging hitters in and around the zone, primarily with fastballs. You want to throw a change in there? Great. You want to throw a curveball in there? Fine. I was on PTO, but of course I'm never far from youth baseball, so I watched a little bit of Little League World Series, and one of the games that I did happen to catch looked like a kid was throwing somewhere around 70% ish breaking balls. Now, 2014 Deven would probably be like 70% breaking balls. What's wrong with us? What does our nation's game come to? Etc. Etc. Again, the thing that we seem to understand through research is that the stress on the joint when kids throw breaking balls and everything that might entail at the preteen level is either just about the same as the fastball or it's actually less. Why is that? Well, typically because when kids throw some type of off speed, they're actually killing. When the kids in youth baseball, preteens, throw some type of off speed pitch, they're typically killing some amount of arm action. Um, they don't yet have the ability to kind of control and manipulate the baseball so that they can leverage spin to create movement, and instead they have gravity help them achieve the same basic outcome. Well, I guess it's not the same basic outcome because these are pitches that are just good because of gravity, not because of spin. But I'll kind of pivot off of that point because the general thing to understand here is that while it's not, to me, particularly alarming if a preteen kid throws a ton of breaking balls because of what I understand through science and research. I want to still keep the main problem. I want to keep the main thing the main thing. And the main thing for all of these kids is going to start by commanding the best tool that they have, which is the heater. I want them to be afforded an opportunity to learn how to compete with their fastball and everything that means. If you can do that and you want to add in a secondary pitch that you can also throw competitively and you can put maybe a little bit of spin on it and you can make it work a little bit differently, hey, fine. My kid used to throw a four-seam fastball that cut a lot because, like most kids, he just cuts the crap out of the ball at release when he was young. It moved because he was trying to throw it hard, so it was fine. I don't know that I need 9, 10, 11-year-olds to like throw a perfectly backspun four-seam fastball. If they do, that's great. If they don't, and they cut the ball and they still throw it hard and they get some good movement because of it, fine. My kid also used to throw what was basically a one-seam slider that he called the alien pitch. I don't know why. Anyways, and it would move a little bit differently than his fastball. So he had a cut fastball and something that was very like slurvy slider-ish. And it was fine. And the important thing about that is that he was, again, learning how to get good at controlling his body when he's moving fast. That sometimes can be a multi-year process. So again, my expectations of, and my ability to kind of like, again, the first thing that I'm trying to think about answering this question is how many innings do they need to develop as a pitcher? It's got to move towards that paradigm. That's where I want them to get towards. Now, how many innings do they need? Well, let's do some quick math. So we got 240 innings, right? How many innings does a kid need to learn that? Man. Let's see. If 20 innings in 30 pitches, 30 pitches for inning is kind of a lot. Let's say 25. Let's say we want 25. We want 20 innings. 20 innings at 25 pitches an inning. It's 500 pitches. I think that's fine. 500 pitches, you could probably go up 10 to 20% and you'd still be okay. You could probably go down 10 to 20% and you'd still be okay. I think in a best case scenario, you're giving every one of those kids somewhere between 20 to 30 innings. This is a really tough question to definitively answer because I can't necessarily say that 40 innings would be a giant drawback. And I can't necessarily say that 20 innings would universally be adequate for the amount of stimulus that every kid could get. The thing I will say is that, number one, this is the reason why tools like Driveline Pulse or even a pocket radar or some other type of radar device are incredibly valuable if you're a coach that really cares about the development of your kids. Because let's say I've got 7 kids on the team that I feel comfortable on, a team of 12 that I feel like are going to pitch. And let's say I want each one of them to get let's see. Let's make the math easier, right? Let's say I've got 8 kids on a team of 12 that I feel confident about pitching, and I want each one of them to get at least around 30 innings. That's my 240, right? You might play with some of those sliders, right? Some of those kids in the first, 10, 12 innings, maybe they're not ready for competitive pitching yet, and they can do side work as they continue to develop their ability to both throw the ball hard and throw the ball accurately. Maybe some of those kids you want to run a little bit more because it's going to help the team because they're competitive pitchers. Okay, so we can maybe take some of those kids and slide them down to about 20 innings. Maybe some of them we slide up to 40. I think that's roughly how I would go about it, but I would want to leverage a tool like Driveline Pulse, or I would want to leverage a tool like a pocket radar or some other type of radar device to try to get somewhere close to the truth about how this development is unfolding. Because as we go from like inning 30 to inning 32 and 33, if I start to see fastball velocity dip, I got some questions. And I might start to pull that down. I pull that kid's volume of innings expected to continue down. If I see a kid who's at 20, 25 innings that I didn't expect to pitch much and their velocities continue to their velocity is continuing to climb and their effectiveness continues to improve, then maybe I want that kid to continue to maybe push towards maybe 30, maybe a couple more innings. The big takeaway here of Michael's question should be that, number one, this stuff is kind of complicated. I don't know that there are really clear, like, right answers that I can give you, but I hope what you take away from this is kind of the thought process about how to try to understand it and how to try to make the best decision that is relevant and applicable to each one of these kids on your roster. That's how I would think about it. Let's maybe say a baseline of 20 to 30 innings is what we want to try to get. The outcome of that 20 to 30 innings, and I want to see kids continue to be effective in their ability to throw the ball hard and throw the ball reasonably accurately. Let's say I'm looking for 50 to 55-ish strike percentage. Maybe the closer we can get from 55 to 60, hey, that's great. And then from there, I am monitoring the outputs to try to make decisions about whether a kid should maybe see a little bit more time, or if kids should see maybe a little bit less time if I see output continue to decline. Complicated, but that's how I would think about it. Next pregunta from my guy Andy. Andy Johnson. Shout out to Andy. He's been around for a while. Long-time listener. Andy's question is, these are the field dimensions we use in our youth association. Is this not the norm? Are most players going from 46-60 fields to 60-90 fields? and not in between. So the dimensions that he's seeing, let me take a water break, is you got your 9 to 10s on a 60-foot base path, 46-foot mound. 11s, they're running 65-foot bases, still on a 46-foot mound. 12s, 13s, they're running a 75-foot base on a 52-foot mound. And then 14 and up, everybody is 60-90, the way that God intended it. First of all, first things first, the words of the Notorious B.I.G. I don't know that there's a right answer for this stuff because a lot of it is going to depend on player populations. You might, again, have a batch of physiologically advanced 11-year-olds that could play 12U at a 75 bases and 52-foot mounds. You might have a group of 12-year-olds that are physiologically regressive that look completely undergunned in that same game environment. Again, it's hard to give definitive answers about this stuff. So I'll tell you what we had in our local league. We basically ran 4660 for everybody from 9 through 12. 13s, 5070. And then you 14 and up is 6090. In the tournaments around here, I've seen 12U at 5070. I've seen 13U at 5480. And then again, 14 6090. It's really tough to know definitively what's correct and accurate. And I think the interesting thing about this question is not necessarily what is the most appropriate environment in this current term, but however, what does that future environment as kids are coming up from the game dictate in terms of the time that they spend optimizing for now versus the time that they spend optimizing for what comes next. That is I think a much more appropriate way to kind of frame the conversation. So again, the general idea that we have to kind of work backwards from is that at 14, you're probably going to have to be playing 60-90, right? Whether that's Little League juniors are playing 60-90, whether that's tournament baseball, generally you're playing 60-90. And if you're a 14-year-old, if you're one of those 14-year-old kids who has a birth date where you will be playing 60-90 and if you're like a 14-year-old freshman instead of a 15-year-old freshman, 60-90 is the thing that you got to kind of work towards. You got to understand what that looks like. So again, to me, paid driveline shill, call it what you want. I think if you understand that at 14U, you are going to be playing 60-90, then at 14U, you need to be throwing the ball somewhere north of 70 miles an hour. I think at 14U, you need to be able to hit the ball, let's say 80 miles an hour as a max. Probably a top eighth of mid sevens. That's what a competitive young 14-year-old on a 90-foot baseball field for the average typically looks like. And again, I'm aware that there are 14-year-olds that throw like 86, right? Like I know that that's a thing. I'm just saying for the purpose of answering this question, that's generally the target that I would have. So, the question of like what's appropriate for 9s, 10s, 46, 60, it's fine. 11s is a tricky one. 11s and 12s is a tricky one, because you're going to have some kids in that group who 46-60, the way that they're doing in the Little League World Series, is entirely appropriate. You're also going to have some kids in that group who are 11 and 12 playing 46-60, and they look like a bunch of professional wrestlers trying to get into like the Keystone Cops car. Man, I feel like I just aged myself 1,000 years by using that reference. I don't know, whatever. Can't hide from the truth. Yeah, I suppose if I had my druthers, I probably would like to see 12U be 5070, and I probably would like to formally see 13U always be 5480. Just because I think that iterative step gives kids, number one, it makes skill development at the 12U level something you need to be a little bit more cognizant of. You can't just be ignorant and just exist on this 4660 field up until the point that you're 14 years old, and then boom goes 6090. That's a massive shift. Uh, some guy, uh, perhaps the balding, graying one that you're listening to right now, wrote a book up there that talks a lot about this transition from 4660 to 6090. Depending on the field, is somewhere between like 230 and 340% increase in play space dimension. It's a real estate problem. And if you're not aware of that coming real estate problem, you run the risk of your baseball loving son or daughter landing on a 60-90 field and being completely overmatched because you failed to index for the skill development that they needed in the preceding 12, 24, 36 months in order to be competitive. That kid's baseball dream dies because you chose the wrong adventure. Again, that's another reference that makes me seem like I'm 1,000 years old, but whatever. Um, so I would like to see 12s, played at 5070. I would like to see 13s play 5480. One of the big problems of this is just like how our fields are pegged and marked and whether they actually have the ability to be convertible that way relative to player populations, relative to moving the mounds around. I mean, my little local league, we had portables that we would put out there and we would be able to move around and reconfigure. Of course, it's a portable. You have to kind of store it at the field. You run the risk of some troglodyte stealing it off the field, defacing it, etc. But yeah, that to me is what I think sounds a little bit more appropriate, just because it gives kids a little bit more runway for kind of a progressive change in the field space instead of generally kind of flat going 4660 and then 6090. So Andy, your 11s at 4665 and 12s and 13s at 5275. Hey man, I love it. I don't know that my idea of 5070 and 5480 is informed by anything other than the fact that like locally that's what a lot of our fields ended up being pegged at. If you've got the access to go 4665 and 5275, anything that you can do that I think gives kind of an iterative pathway in this accumulation of play space, I think is a good thing. So that's gas. I love it. Da 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 da. Next, pregunta. Okay, somebody wanted to know. It's my guy High Intent with a Fred McGriff one. I love you, buddy. I know you've touched on it before, but making plans for our 10U travel team's fall and winter phase. Would love to hear about your program. We have a light fall ball schedule. I want to add strength and speed work before the end of the year. We start baseball workouts in January. Good question. Again, this is the point in time where I said during housekeeping that the most complete, full answer I can give you is contained within the pages of that book there and all the online resources that come with it. Yes, I'm aware I'm a paid shill, but I like having a job. I poured my soul and guts into that book, and there's a lot of good stuff in there, so I would check it out. 10U, 10U, and I think that's kind of the critical piece about this, is at the 10U level, do they need to play more games or do they need to focus on development relative to what's coming next? And here, I don't know if this is a 9U team that's going to be playing 10U next year or if this is a 10U team that's going to be playing 11U next year. In either way, I suppose my answer would be the same. I'm not sure, because I don't know the kids, which one they need more. But I can give you some perspective on it. I don't know that kids need to have, man, it's such a tricky thing. Our game is so exceptionally technical, and as it progresses, you really get to that point from like on the T-ball thing or like coach pitch games. It's like you have 9 kids standing out there, the ball get hit to one of them. At best, you have a first baseman coming to cover the bag, and you have a fielder trying to field and throw the ball. At best, a lot of times. You don't have the thing that it becomes when you get to 90-foot baseball when, like, man, everybody's got a job on every single play. And the tricky part about answering this question is that, you're saying you have a light fall ball schedule. However, any amount of gameplay in the fall and winter, and I'm just kind of adding the winter in there for anybody that's also thinking about winter ball or has the weather to do winter ball. Any amount of gameplay in that phase is going to inhibit your ability to focus discreetly on the development stuff because you don't want to mix thrown ball velocity work with gameplay. Those two things are oil and water. They should not be combined. I suppose the trailing question here is, do 10-year-olds need to do velocity work? Well, here's the thing that I know. I know that over the course of the next 24 months, let's assume that they're going to be 10U on this coming year and they're going to be at 12U 2 years from now. In the next 24 months, these kids need to learn how to throw the ball harder. They need to get some amount of recurring stimulus that affords them the opportunity to increase force production and increase movement speed and increase movement quality that lands them in that place. They also need to learn how to play the game of baseball because most 10-year-olds are just not, the Chase Utley, silver fox. You just don't see that at the 10U level, man. They're kids. They are barely out of single digits. They are still having mom and dad pack them a lunch when they go to school. They might be getting bedtime songs sung to them at night. My wife and I were just reminiscing on the bedtime songs we used to sing to our children. Shout out to Wilco and Kings of Leon for providing that soundtrack. So they need that too. So I understand for young kids the allure of having them do something like fall ball or a light fall ball schedule because you get a little bit more game reps, right? And you want to be able to do those things. And there are some things that you can tactically learn about playing the game of baseball that are hard to kind of like train in a gym in cages like these ones that are just on the other side of that wall. So I get it. I can tell you that what we do in academy is like, hey, we don't do fall ball. We don't do it. We don't do it because it inhibits our ability to focus discreetly on increasing the skill. So the thing you need to wrap your brain around is if this is a thing that you're going to do with a 10U team, then just understand that in this specific off-season phase, when you're going to be doing that gameplay, even if it's light, you're just going to kind of punt on any thrown ball velocity work during that period of time. Can you do bat speed stuff? Can you do strength stuff? Can you do probably defense even while you're playing a light fall ball phase? Yeah, I think that's probably fine. The thing we just don't want to cross pollinate here is thrown ball velocity work or high intent throwing during training while we are playing the game as well. The reason that you don't want to do those things is because the way that we do our throwing program, detailed extensively in the Skills and Skill Complete Baseball Training Manual or other resources you may have access to, it's predicated on maintaining the rest days to recover from the intensity of throwing. We don't want to screw that up because when we screw up or compromise recovery, we're opening the door for bad things to happen. So, what I would say is that again, some of the answer here is just going to be is going to be specific to your team, to your group of kids, to your sense of kind of like what these kids need. And if you're committed to doing fall ball and winter ball, and you're going to start baseball workouts in January, that's fine. Just understand that if you're starting that on January 1, you only have 8 weeks, right? So if we're starting that on January 1, the question is going to be, okay, can we go right into velo work? And like, I don't know. I don't know. Because again, reflect back on the first question we answered about this need for kids to take some amount of time off from throwing. That's a real thing that is true for 10-year-olds. So if we do fall ball and we do winter ball, and then we're going to get to the end of December, and we have games are going to start up in March. Maybe baseball practices, baseball games start in March, mid-March. We've got 8 to 10 weeks. Okay, well, if we take 4 of those weeks to deload, we're going to be our no throw period. That means we have to kind of like progressively on ramp to get ready for throwing again in practices and games over 6 weeks. And now we don't have the opportunity to do a velocity phase. You just shouldn't do that. I would not want to go. I mean, you could do a 4 week deload, go right into velo work, and go right into games. That's typically not how we recommend doing it. We want to do some sort of what we call a blend to competition phase at the conclusion of velo phase. The idea is we're throwing the ball harder. We got to learn how to utilize that because that's a different thing, especially with all the physiological variants that kids are going to experience when they're this age and they're growing. So yeah, again, I feel like this is again me blathering and not really providing the most clear answer. And I'm trying. I can just tell you, like, we don't do fall ball or winter ball for a reason because it's the only period of time that we can really focus on developing the skill away from the game. And if you've got March through July that can be your gameplay phase, I would kind of submit that for a 10 or 11-year-old kid that they probably don't need to be playing more games in the fall and the winter, because if the importance of playing games in the fall and the winter is just to have them learn how to play the game better, okay, we've got March through July for that. And there's no way that at 10 years old that those games in March through July are so impactful that if we are still actively learning in that period of time, that it does some sort of huge detriment to our baseball career or our baseball experience. I don't think that that's true. So for me, I would punt on the fall ball entirely. That doesn't mean we can't do baseball stuff. We're just not playing games because I don't want to have to worry about trying to control pitching workload at the same time as I'm doing developmentally anything on the throwing side. If you got to play those games, and what I would do is I would just use that period of time to try to work on bat speed, strength, what we call long-term athletic development for kids at these ages, as best you can, and then get to the end of that phase, that gameplay phase, and you're going to have to make a decision about what you need to do about taking time off from throwing. You got to fit it in at some point. So the question is when. And if you're going to fit in that time off from throwing, you also have to fit in the back end of that equation, which again, slowly on ramping our workload back up so we can go play in games. At best, that should be an 8-week process, if not 10, including both of those things, the no throw and the onboard. So something to think about. Next pregunta. How do you plan a throwing program where you can only see or get the kids together for 2 to 3 times a week? I'll answer that question with a question. Why do you think kids need to be throwing more than 3 times a week? Again, you don't get stronger under the barbell. You get better. You get stronger after you take the time when you're not under the barbell to sleep and eat. Let your body do its thing. Again, we are these natural adaptation machines. That adaptation is predicated on recovery. Generally, as far as we understand, it still works the same way on the skill side. So I would say for kids that are, again, pre-teen, and even your 13-year-olds and possibly your 14-year-olds, I don't know that they really need to be throwing more than 3 times a week, because I want to make sure on a day-to-day basis that they have enough recovery to recover from the repetitive stress of throwing and to get that super compensation result that takes place when we actually keep our recovery time intact. You can Google super compensation. You're going to see some pretty cool graphs about what that looks like visually. I would strongly suggest doing that. Throwing 3 times a week, totally fine. If you want a program for it, Skills to Skill Complete Baseball Training Manual, or go to drivelinebaseball.com. The free youth individual program or the free team program will show you how to lay out that throwing program as well. My guy Phil wants to know more about our Velo program we run in the fall and how we have it laid out. Now get back to work, missing my weekly listen. Shout out to you, Phil, for being a long-time listener, man. I appreciate you rolling with us. Velo program for us, if you want to describe it in the most simple terms, I'll mute my laptop. um, is a recovery, a hybrid day, and an intent day. Recovery day, hybrid day, intent day. It's not necessarily rocket science. Um, however, um, we got to talk about the fact that we've seen gains in velocity that are significant without kids actually doing any velocity work. What, Devin, how does that make sense? What do you mean? Okay, here's the deal. We've had some kids, my son being one of them, who, when he shut down, and this is last off season, and had like an 8-week shutdown, focused a lot on strength, and then re-onboarded, and with doing no velocity work whatsoever, was up like 3 ticks. That's kind of significant. And I think what that does is it gives you some pretty simple signal about the truth about how important strength and athleticism is to the skill of baseball. You can do all the skill work in the world, and if you fundamentally neglect the what we would call the high performance side, what you would understand is strength, athletic development, all that type of like the athletic engine that is underneath the skill. You do all the skill work and you fundamentally neglect that other part, the underlying ecosystem of the skill, you're probably not going to get as good as you could be. There is an interesting question here, which is, okay, well, if that's true, then consider, could I continue to increase velocity in a sustainable way simply by focusing on the strength side and having that programmed by a very, very smart man or woman? Take, for example, our own Connor Stratton, who is a Jedi when it comes to this stuff here in the academy. If I could increase throw ball velocity and I could increase bat speed, basically that pathway without doing any skill specific work, and I felt like that pathway had almost nil when it comes to injury risk, then like, why would I do a pull down? It's an interesting question to try to like wrap your brain around. Now, I will devil's advocate myself, I guess, because I'm in here talking to myself. So I'll for sure just like let my psychosis just fully be on display, and I will double advocate my own point that I just made. Velocity work as it exists in driveline baseball when it comes to plyo care high intensity days on a mound, pull downs, run and guns, whatever you want to call them, even high intent leather weighted baseball work for our high school age players. There are benefits there, as far as we understand, in terms of the way that players learn to move and sequence their bodies actively in the skill. That's a thing that we believe to be true. At the same time, we also understand that the skill is generally not going to reach its ultimate expression of where it can get to in capacity if you fundamentally neglect the athletic engine underneath the skill. So you got to do both. You just got to do both, as far as we understand. I would love to tell you that I felt unilaterally confident that every player in our academy or every player in the country could find their ceiling when it comes to velo work without ever doing a pull down or without ever doing a plyo velo or a full high intent mound day where you really don't care where it's going. You're just trying to move and sequence as fast as possible. I wish that was a thing. It would make training a lot easier. I'm not sure that that's true. I think you have to adequately address both, but I will tell you that like it's just phenomenally important that more people understand that like you're not going to reach the ceiling of the skill if you neglect the athleticism underneath. You're just not going to get there. And again, think about the 14-year-olds that we've seen that throw mid eights. Do those kids look like the average 14-year-old? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I was talking to one of our 14-year-old families who their player is going to be playing high school baseball next year, and the kid currently weighs 113 pounds. That's 12 pounds up from where he was at the beginning of the year. So we're making positive progress, but we got a ways to go. That 113-pound kid is tomato potato versus the 14-year-old that's throwing mid eights. They're just not the same. The physiology plays a role. It's really important. And to a degree, unless you're just like a complete space alien, the 113-pound 14-year-old is not going to put out the same amount of force as a kid that's like a $150 or a $170 or 205. Those are completely different animals. So what you want to do is make sure that you adequately address, relative to the athlete's current physiology, the amount of force production that you can have them do. Again, American Society of Pediatricians has said that resistance training is safe for children starting at age 8. So you can miss me with all of these. Well, we got to wait until the growth plates close. We got to wait until the sun is in the 7th phase of the Geordian moon. Saturn is in the orbit of Gaia's star, whatever. It's safe for kids to be able to get stronger. So you got to do both. You got to do that. You got to do the velocity phase. If you want the programs, Skill Complete Youth Baseball Training Manual, I got all the stuff for you. Again, I feel like a paid shield, but like the answers are there. They're in the book. That's why I wrote it. So you should do that. This is a good one. Greg, drop 5 bats are appropriate for 12U. That's his stance. The certification of USSSA is the problem. Would love to hear your opinion about it. Greg, you're 100% right. Recently, I don't know if anybody's seen this, but like PG just came out and outright banned, I think, 12U, drop 5 bats at the 12U level. Just like fundamentally not a thing that you can do. I will try to heat check myself before I say that with my entire chest. Yes. Effective August 15th, Perfect Game will not allow the use of any drop 5 bat in a 12U event. Additionally, they're lifting the ban on the Hype Fire. So the Hype Fire is now okay in PG for levels above 12U. Can't swing it in 12U. Can't swing any drop 5s in 12U. So I think Greg's point is very relevant, right? He's just saying like the issue isn't necessarily the spec of the bat. The issue is that spec of bat when combined with the BPF 1.15 performance factor of USSSA certified bats. You're right. I couldn't agree more. We just got to understand that, like, you know, we're this slow march forward in technology, I think, is going to provide more and more examples of this. Every once in a while, we're going to see a bat that comes out and it's just like it's the bee's knees, man. It's the hottest thing that we got, and everybody's going to go buy it because if you've got your child playing in USSSA events and you don't have your child swinging the hottest U-trip that they can find, look, man, you're just sending them into a gunfight with a very dull butter knife. That sucks. No parent on the planet is going to willingly put their child in that position. When I had my child play in the very limited amount of events that he had that allowed you trip bats, hey man, I went and got the good stuff. You know, my son's own first legit over the fence home run was with a OG Canadian made Combat B1, which is a U-Trip 1.15 bat, and those B1's combats were legit bats. Skinnier barrel, weirdly enough, not this, you know, gigantic 2 5/8, 2 3/4 nonsense that they have nowadays. But that bat was hot. The reality is you've got 12-year-olds who in terms of their current level of strength, in terms of their current level of swing mechanics, it's entirely appropriate for that kid to be swinging a drop 5 bat when it comes to the swing weight, moment of inertia of said bat. And they're not yet ready to swing a drop 3 BB core. An outright ban on 12U drop 5s is going to hurt some kids because you're going to force them to move to drop 3s before they're ready. And to a degree, if you allow that to continue, a kid has like an undeveloped level of strength and isn't able to maintain posture or barrel direction during their swing, you're going to see a lot of like dump and chuck, otherwise known as the so-called launch angle swing that your favorite national baseball commentator likes to demonize. So yeah, the issue is just the U-Trip certification. The issue is that we just have talked ourselves into, this configuration of our sport where some of the largest game providers and one of the largest organizations that makes the rules for our sport, well, maybe not their own rules. I guess U-Trip is just an organization like any other. They allow for this specific set of bats, and somebody's gonna get hurt. I'm sure that somebody's already been hurt. It's only going to continue to get. It's going to stay the same as it is at the 11U level, right? Because you're not banning you're not making 11-year-olds not swing drop 8 and drop 10 U trips. Those bats are crazy hot. And if I'm thinking about this correctly, it's not that they're banning 12U drop 8 U trips, right? They're just banning the 12U drop 5s. It's pretty goofy, man. Pretty goofy. I don't think that that's the right way to solve the problem. I think the base thing that we need to solve for is the specification. And again, USA Baseball's already tried to solve this. That's why we have the USA Baseball standard. That's why that exists. That's why Little League runs USA stamp bats. U-Trip wants to do their own thing. Consider the incentive structure of why that's a thing. Again, this is just, parents are going to show their love with their pocketbooks. If they have the opportunity to do so, they are going to, every year, we're going to go to justbats.com and we are going to try to find the hottest bat that barely skirts the rules. And that's the one that's going to end up on eBay going for, 300% of its retail price. So long as we allow the USSSA certification and this BPF 1.15 standard to continue in the hands of progressively more and more athletically developed children, it's only going to get worse. So good luck with that. It's not great, man. It's not great in any way, shape, or form. I'm not sure that that's the right way to try to solve that problem. But look, I have no sway with the organizations that are allowing that certification. I don't know what the highest level optics of changing that look like. But good luck. Couple more questions and I'll get you out of here. Eddie, who's a Slack guy in our Slack, had a quick question. If your kid is on a close to year-round travel team and you're looking to keep him on the team for competitive reps, but request a block of the year off, how much time would be quote unquote enough to keep it more healthy and allow for proper time to rest and build up? Can we do this all at once, or can it be split into 2 periods of time? Okay, so I'm going to answer the second part of the question first. 2 rest periods means 2 onboarding periods. So if at best we are going to no throw or rest for 4 weeks and we are going to re-onboard for 4, that means if you do that twice, 4, 8, that's 16 weeks that you're taking away where you're neither developing skill really or playing games. So it means everything else is constrained into a 8-month season. Um, if those onboards are actually more like 6 weeks, then you are going to 20 weeks. So that's 5 months out of the year we're taking off. I wouldn't do it that way. I would take one concentrated development phase, and then I would continue to do the things necessary to sustain that development in season, which really just amounts to staying on some type of strength training program, some type of long-term athletic development program. You want a program like that, Skills Go Complete Baseball Training Manual. I guess we're going to play a game with like how many times I can pump the book in this particular episode. I would say if you're going to shut down for at least 4, I would want to have another 8 weeks of development on the backside plus another 4. So that's 16 weeks is what I would want. I would want 4 to take time off from throwing, and I would want 12 to develop skill. So 4 weeks off, 6 weeks on. That's really not enough. That gives you 10. So then you can do 4 weeks of velo and then 2 weeks of blend a season, which is probably fine. It's probably fine. I mean, again, a lot of this has to do with like, are you actually trying to develop velo? What does that process look like? Yeah, I would honestly. I mean, it's 20 weeks for me. That's what we do, and I know that that's weirdly excessive, but the 20-week off season that we run here at the Academy in Washington allows us to get the type of development gains that turn kids into outlier skill. That's what we got. I hate using my own child as an example of our program, but unfortunately, having this be my first day back at work and my brain is not particularly completely acclimated to not being on Italy time, I'll just use the example that I know most acutely. My kid, I think, threw like 43 miles an hour when he first showed up at the door at Driveline. He threw an 86 mile an hour turbo sinker a couple weeks ago. A 40 plus mile an hour velocity improvement in 5.5 years or whatever it is. Came from every single year basically having that 20-week off season so we could really lean into the skill development side. And then during the 13U and 14U seasons, before he got into high school baseball, continuing to train and develop strength all year because we weren't constrained by the Little League season. We weren't constrained by the high school season. That's the path that I know most clearly. It involved a 20-week off season. That to me is it's the best way to get there. Second question. Blah, blah, blah. Do you see value in doing select or travel ball versus not very well run and over competitive in all the wrong ways rec ball at the 12U level in terms of the skill specifics in game reps that they get? Or does it really not matter much, even if the rep ball reps available are really that bad? At what age would you say would be crucial to start looking for useful competitive in game reps? It's tough. And it's tough because of what's happened to Little League. I think the tricky part about this is that the level of play at the Little League level, in some areas, and I'm not trying to paint with too broad of a brush, but in some areas it has gotten worse, is what I understand. I don't want to, again, paint with too broad of a brush. I know some of the folks that I talk to on a fairly frequent basis out there that are running local little leagues. They're seeing growth, and they're just doing a great job of engaging their community and getting those kids to play and keeping kids in little league. So I know that that's a thing that is possible. But if you're around one of those little leagues where you've already lost some of your A tier talent to selector club ball, and that loss of your A tier talent peeled away some of your B tier talent. So now what you're left with is like your C's and D's. It can be tough. Um, it can be tough. I don't love that trend at all because of what it's just going to force to happen in our game. Um, because really what you're doing is just you're going to turn recreational baseball into like this weird ghetto where the overall level of play is pretty bad, except for like this hyper concentrated group of all-star kids who do little league and select or club ball. They don't really show up much during the regular season, but then they're just like they are the team that is your little league's all-star roster. That makes me feel really gross. Eddie's question directly, though, is at what age do these reps start to mean something? Um, and I think that the answer to it is really relative to what you have access to. Um, if all you have access to is the competitive level of Little League Baseball or the competitive level or like club or select ball, then unfortunately, if your local league is one of those leagues that has suffered in the last 4 or 6 years and the competitive level is down, then you're faced with the same choice that I think a lot of parents face, which is either like have my kid be on the field with a bunch of kids who are being forced to play a game that they are neither technically nor skill wise ready for. And that experience can suck straight up. Or cut a check. And man, those are crappy choices to have to be faced with. And I don't even, Eddie's question is kind of about like the skill development side. I'm more just thinking about like the social environment. It's whether we want to admit it or not, when you have a kid who really wants to be good at baseball and they're on a team of kids who either aren't that focused or they're not that competitive, it can be a tough social environment. They feel like they're just kind of mismatched. Um, and it's hard to tell a young kid who at a cognitive level attaches all this like emotional value to winning that like they should tamp that down. Obviously, again, I wrote a whole book about how to equip coaches and parents with the tools necessary to provide context on those type of experiences. And I think that that's a thing that you can do. The tricky part is that like, well, what if you have to do that for 20 straight games? It's hard. I know it's hard. Uh, I had a little league team that went like 4-16 or 5-17 or some craziness like that. Like I've been there. I know it's difficult. So to be clear, the social emotional side of it is one thing, and I think I can't from my perch give any type of answer about what's most appropriate relative to the options you have for club or select ball and relative to what your options are for like a little league recreational experience. um, to answer the question about the skill side, and this is why I was kind of digging into like this whole like what are your options thing. From the skill side, I don't think any of it matters. uh, I mean, honestly, I think you can construct an environment for your child where 2 to 3 days a week you can train the skill in a meaningful and a sticky way and not be dependent upon the game environment to try to teach you that. Best case scenario in a youth game, whether that's select ball or club ball, you're getting 3 at bats, maybe 4. If I go down to an empty field on a Saturday with one of my kids, I can conduct an environment where I get 10 times that. And I can do that 2 to 3 times a week. And I can do that on the defensive side. I could even do that on the pitching side. I can do that on the hitting side easily. And we're not just training the game in like a vapid, dry environment. We are running games, and I am keeping score in these environments while I'm working with my kid, while I'm working with a couple kids. I don't think you need to be dependent upon the game to develop your player. Development is development, and you stress that development in an appropriate amount of games. Does it matter to like eventually be able to be in an environment where you see a kid on the mound and you have to read the ball coming off the hand? Yeah, eventually. But I'm also pretty convicted that like if you can see the ball, you can see the ball. And I could short box, firm front flips, whatever my kid from 30 feet away, from 20 feet away, from 15 feet away, and I can progressively increase the difficulty of that so that it compels them to develop a set of timing and mechanics that are relative to an increasingly more complex problem. And by doing so, when they get on a field and they have to read the ball out of a hand from a kid that's 46 feet away, easy peasy. All we're talking about at this point is just like be on time. That's what I did. I didn't put either one of my kids in a position where they're dependent upon the game to teach them the skill. And that I think is the biggest point that I want to compel is that like if you're that motivated of a parent and you have that child that's so intrinsically motivated, well, maybe they're not even intrinsically motivated yet. Maybe they just love baseball. But if you're that parent that has the time and the privilege and the affordance to be able to put that kind of time into your kid, and I promise you, no matter where their baseball career goes, it will be worth it. If you have that ability, then you don't have to be dependent upon the game and whatever its environment's specific competition level is to develop the skill. You're not. So the bigger question is like, what's the social emotional environment? What's most important? Look, at the end of the day, I'll give you some guidelines. At 10 years old, man, I just want kids to have a ton of fun and be jazzed as when we go, hey, we got baseball practice tonight. We got a game tonight. And they're like, heck yeah. And they are fired up to put on that goofy little hat and that goofy little uniform and their little baseball pants. And they're jazzed up to go play the game.